Aside from ESG pressures, what are the other factors to consider when creating a robust supply chain? How can organizations be expected to perform due diligence on new second and third tier partners, especially now when physical meetings are so restricted, and how the bigger risk is cyber risk? We'll be trying to tackle these questions and much more in this brief virtual roundtable session, which is one of a series of 3 brought to you by Refinitiv, a London Stock Exchange Group business. The highlights of this trio of roundtables will be captured in an article in the Procurement and Supply Chain Innovation Special Report, which is published in the Times on March the 24th. I'm Oliver Pickup, a London-based technology and business journalist, and I'm your host and moderator for these roundtables, which are grouped together under the title Building a Resilient and Sustainable Supply Chain for 2021. I'm thrilled to welcome half a dozen of the world's most influential procurement and supply chain leaders, spanning a number of industries and geographical regions. It's great to have you here. Thank you for joining me. I'm hoping that you'll be able to offer your expert insight and experience to our audience members to better equip them to solve the challenges they face today and are likely to encounter in the near future. Let's begin then with this puzzler. Aside from ESG pressures, what are the other factors to consider when creating a robust supply chain?
Things like social value, I think, are incredibly important. Bringing value back to your communities. Your community is where you operate, where your employees live, where your future employees are going to come from. So I think that is something that the functions are going to have to think about a lot more. But it doesn't mean treat every supplier in exactly the same way, because they are different.
That's a great point. Thank you very much, Malcolm. And I mean, Ryan, if I could come to you a little bit. I mean, I suppose I know you obviously have to have a lot of partnerships. You're considering doing kind of more outsourcing, but can you tell me a little about how you kind of changing the cultural piece given the scandals in the recent past and the pivot to this new business?
Sure. Well, I'll just talk briefly about the importance of partnerships, right, which the others have touched on. I mean, if I use the examples of the partnerships that BP has with Microsoft and Amazon, you can see a real synergistic approach to advancing our agendas towards a net zero future. Both companies, excuse me, share that vision, and both companies bring a set of expertise and skills to move us on the journey. And what that means for the culture and specifically the procurement function. So if I think about the conversations and the activity sets we have with both those partners, BP has the capability to sell renewable power solutions to those companies, enable them on their journey, and reciprocally, Amazon and Microsoft are enabling our vision with different types of cloud solutions, technologies to help us be much more efficient in our operations, to reduce our carbon footprint, to for example, move out of data centers and with more sustainable type infrastructure. So there's just a huge amount of benefit. And if I think about the procurement role and all of that, there is a different type of leadership required to navigate these multi-variable, big stakeholder complex relationships that are really serving the greater good. And you need to be able to connect the dots across the large enterprise. We're all working for large companies here, and there's a lot of different initiatives, and these partners have a lot of different solutions they can sell us. So how do you kind of prioritize efforts? And the culture that I think that we're trying to build is a set of thinking and leadership around putting the company purpose and ambition first, and then working and influencing across the network to find the areas of greatest opportunity, such that then we can move us forward on the journey. It's very different than the past, perhaps, which you kind of had silos across the functions, right? The horizontal integration is accelerating at a rapid pace, whereby we're working much more closely across the different facets of the business, where in the past, procurement tended to be a bit more subservient and service oriented after they defined the objectives in their part of the business. So there's a big change underway.
And I suppose increasingly a concern is, again, coming to you, Charles, the tiered system, but also cybersecurity, cyber risk. This is increasingly important, isn't it? What advice would you give there?
Yeah, I think it's enormous. So damages from cybercrime is estimated to reach $6 trillion this year. and it'll go to $10.5 trillion by 2025. So I think everyone sort of sees that, you know, if $6 trillion was an economy, it would be just smaller than China. So it would be the third largest economy in the world. There's been obviously this massive acceleration to a decentralized workforce. And certainly there's a lot of information that's flowing that was largely contained by physical and network security that may not be as secured as it once was. And so we've seen that there's been obviously this massive pickup in cybercrime. And if you think about some of the real impact that's had, you know, we've seen attacks being made on the cold train, so the networking that's been put together to deliver vaccines, for example. We've seen some cyber attacks there. We've seen cyber attacks on research firms, companies conducting trials. So it's out there, and it's affecting, you know, our ability to you know, to move on from this pandemic. And certainly, you know, we see in you know, with our customers that they're wanting to get a better sense of the cyber resiliency that their suppliers have, and that's largely historically been reserved for the most critical suppliers. But ultimately, there tends to be risk across the entire supply chain in this space now. So we're seeing more of a push for more predictive analytics on suppliers. Ratings companies are you know, a big part of that now. Can I get an initial indication of the posture of my supplier, and then I can go from there. So we're seeing more of an emphasis of that as one of the key risks being identified throughout the supplier life cycle.
And I'm sorry to slightly put you on the spot here, Thomas, but in terms of politics and you know, recent politics, the American election, I'll speak to one of the other panelists in a minute, but how has Brexit affected you greatly, and what are the sort of political factors are you feeling?
Brexit specifically for Bayer, not very significant, no. We don't have manufacturing, we don't have too much sort of in the inbound supply chain sitting there. Of course, at a business level, it has had a significant impact, and our biggest concern was, you know, will we be able to deliver our medicine to our patients? You know, if our supply chains break, you know, unfortunately, people are likely to die. So a lot of the medicine we have needs to reach the patient in time, and that's been our primary concern. But again, I think the UK government found partners. They have been very sensitive to particular life science healthcare, and we haven't. It certainly hasn't reached my radar too much.
Okay, well, I'm pleased to hear that, certainly. Ingrid, perhaps I can come to you. How much more support, let's say, from you know, governments around the world? Does there need to be more international collaboration and influence from governments?
Yeah, I would say that we never estimated. I mean, Malcolm mentioned we never thought Brexit would happen. We never thought a huge trade war would happen in the US either. I used it as one of my stress scenarios 5 years ago and never imagined that it would actually become real. So how do you operate your supply chain under that duress, right? How do you keep that supply chain going and keep it cost effective as much as possible? That is definitely something where authorities and governments and international collaboration can significantly help to solve and just reduce some of the supply chain pressure there.
Indeed. I mean, if the last few years and 2020 especially have taught us anything, it is to expect the unexpected. Agility and collaboration with friends and enemies alike is important to remain agile. And that's the perfect place to end this virtual roundtable session, I think. Please do look at the other 2 videos in this series, sponsored by Refinitiv, a London Stock Exchange Group business, with one that attempts to answer the question, what do resilient and sustainable supply chain and procurement functions look like in 2021? And we've got another one that asks, how will the procurement and supply chain functions evolve in the coming years? Please do click on the links to discover what our team of experts have to say about those 2 topics. Thank you very much for watching.